Hello everybody, my name is Poggy and I really wanted to do this video for you guys. This is going to be your comprehensive guide to how to counterplay the hag. So why would you watch this video and not some of the other videos on YouTube? Well, I'm a hag main with over 1800 hours in Dead by Daylight and I have about 800, 700 hours just on hag. And I often see survivors struggling with the basics of how to counter the hag, and it's a very common thing. Now, in the higher ranks, sometimes you get swift teams and they know immediately what to do, but that's very rare. And in my experience, most of the players that I play against just don't know how to counter hag. It also depends on how awake I am. However, I want to help survivors do better. I want to see the survivors perform better against the hag and give me a more difficult time. God, I'm a masochist. And so we're going to go over some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, perks and items, and a little bit of the strategy behind how to counterplay the hag and what I see as the killer. So a little bit about hag. She's obviously kind of just a glorified camper. Like, her entire shtick is she gets someone on a hook, she traps the hook, survivors go to the hook, trip the trap, and she's back at the hook. So she's kind of a glorified camper in that sense. She's also, these are her strengths, by the way. She's also really good at looping in short loops, not really long loops, because longer loops, she's actually a slower killer and so doesn't move as fast. She has really great map pressure. If you compare her to killers like Demo, Freddy, Spirit, Nurse, all those that can teleport or move quickly across the map, Billy, any of those killers, Oni is another one that can move really fast across the map. If you compare to any of those, specifically let's say Freddy, since he can teleport to generators, those two are probably the strongest in terms of map pressure, just by virtue of the fact that they can instantly or virtually instantly be across the map. And that is a huge deal. Another strength is instant teleport hits. So if you haven't seen this before, ITH is what it's called for short. It's whenever the hag has a trap tripped and she immediately teleports to the trap. This is a huge deal because it allows her to get really fast hits. It can also be counterplay, but we'll go to that in the strategy section. And another fact about ITH hits is that they are actually very difficult to pull off for the killer, but they have to, maybe rebind the control key or the scroll wheel to a macro, or scrolling it really fast, anything like that kind of just keeps it going. And also the way that the hag traps around the map will signify exactly how this next one plays out, but keeping the survivors guessing. Whenever we're keeping the survivors guessing, that's because we're putting traps in different places. We're not being too predictable as the hag. We're not putting all of our traps by generators. We're not putting all of our traps by pallets. We're mixing it up. We're creating uncertainty. And that is something that is hard to counterplay against. This is another strength as well. She has really dark skins, which are really difficult to see. And she's also quite short. I think she's about the same height or maybe a little shorter than the Blight and Freddy. I'm not sure about the height differences, but I'll have to look at it again. The hag is also really good at zoning survivors. She can take survivors in a situation and put them in any other situation that she wants just by putting a trap down, and that can scare the survivor in a specific direction. Now, she can do this by looping around the pallet, putting a trap down in a specific place, and the survivor will usually run the opposite direction. So she can zone you into wherever she wants you to go, and as the survivor, you have to counterplay that as well. Again, we're going to go over all of that in the strategy section. She's also really good at snowballing. So snowballing, especially with basement, and basement is a huge thing because, again, she's a glorified camper. So whenever she gets one down, if the survivors are not careful in that moment of getting the rescue, she can start to snowball that pressure down. And there's multiple ways of doing that. One is she can immediately teleport and get a hit before you've gotten on the hook, and then hit you after you get the unhook, and then chase the survivor down really quick and get them down too. Or she can teleport, wait for you to go for the grab, and then grab you off the hook, and then either hook you or drop you on the ground. So there's multiple different ways to go about it. It also is going to depend on what perks she's running, but that's usually not something that's going to be part of this video. We're talking about mostly base hag. So now we're going to go over some of the hag's weaknesses. Now, she does have weaknesses. Obviously, all killers do. And one of her biggest weaknesses is the early game. Much like Trapper, in the sense that the Trapper has trouble with time in the beginning of the game, because he has to set up his traps around the map, go collect them, all that. The hag has her web, which is the same equivalent of what the Trapper does. That is, what she has to do in the early game is start setting up her traps. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 traps in the first maybe minute and a half of the game. And so this is the time that is the weakest for her and gives the survivors the most advantage because they can rush generators in that time. Now, I'm saying rush, but not like rush necessarily of prove thyself or anything, but they can just sit on generators in that time. Now, the hag can try to harass those at the beginning of the game, and sometimes you will as hag, but for the most part, your opening game is going to be reserved for laying down your traps. Another weakness would be that she's very bad at long chases. And we talked about this a little bit in her strength, where in short loops, she's very strong. But in longer loops or just holding W through a hallway or whatever, hag is going to lose a lot of time and a lot of ground. It's going to take her a long time to catch up, and the survivors are going to have no trouble at all getting to safety. When the hag can't use her traps, this is a big deal. So there are some weaknesses that are like sub-weaknesses here. So this is like the hag can't use her traps when she's in an animation, like kicking a pallet or jumping through a window. So you might want to trip them then. She can't carry a survivor to a hook, and if she's too far away from the trap, she can't necessarily teleport to it, again, unless she has like the dried cicada or the dragonfly wings. But we're talking about base hag, and for the most part, if she's too far away, you can't really get to the trap in time. Another weakness would be some certain perks and items that we'll discuss right now in this next section called perks and items. So I have them written down. I want to make sure I didn't miss any, but there's a handful of perks and items that are in the game that'll actually prevent the hag from having as fun of a time as she otherwise could. For example, small game. Small game is a perk that enables the survivor to see in a 45-degree cone in front of them. Well, not see, but they get an auditory warning whenever a trap, either by a trapper or a hag, is in front of them. And of course, this perk small game can be really strong during a chase. If you are running towards a pallet and small game goes off while you're running straight towards it, you know that either you're going to drop the pallet immediately or you're going to just avoid that loop altogether. So it can be very strong to counter hag with small game. Small game is not generally a great perk to run, but let's say you're in a tournament and you know you're going to be playing hag, you might consider a small game perk. Object of obsession, of course, a lot of survivors run this for various reasons, and one of the main reasons is to shout stuff to their Swift, but sometimes they're just a single player playing object because it's one of the dailies or whatever. So it can basically, and this will work with keys that can track auras too. Basically, any way that you can see the killer with an aura is going to present a problem for the hag, because the hag relies in large part on stealth, or at least being left alone to put her traps down where people don't know that they are. Now, the one thing that kind of counters this from the hag's perspective is that the hag is able to just continue placing traps up to 10, and that can be really hard even for a team of 4 people to remember where all of the traps are. Now, it may still hinder her that you know where some of them are, but if you've forgotten even one and she zones you into that area, it can really screw you. And sometimes she can just zone you in there without you even having any choice. Another perk, of course, would be Spine Chill. Spine Chill is a very strong perk against a lot of killers, but especially stealth killers. And while I don't necessarily want to put hag in that category of stealth killer, she kind of is, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But one of the reasons is because I run Monitor and Abuse on my hag a lot, and it lowers her terror radius to basically nothing. And she's short, she's hard to see, so I mean, I would put her in that category depending on how you're playing her. Another way to counter the hag is with an item. So there's 2 main items you can use to counter hag, and that is map with the ability to track killers' belongings. So you either want the red twine or you want the rainbow map. And then there's flashlights, and flashlights are a big thing I see a lot of survivors using, and I think using ineffectively, or just maybe going to it as this is the only way to counter hag, and that's not true, and we'll get to that in a minute. But flashlights are great, and they break traps, and this is a big deal. So essentially, if you point the flashlight at a trap, it takes it about a second, and then the trap will just dissolve and break. Now, the killer will be notified of this, that you broke it, but it's not like you don't get to see auras and stuff like that. Yeah, so that's a big deal. If you are worried about Huntress, if you're worried about hag, you can go to a chest, find a flashlight, and you can use that to break traps that you might come across. So, we want to talk about the strategy. So now this is the big meat. We're going to take everything we talked about in her strengths, weaknesses, and about the hag in general, and we're going to discuss some of the various ways you can employ a strategy against the hag. So let's say you load into a game, you come in and you realize, oh, it's a hag. Like, it takes you a minute, you've been running around, maybe you've half done a generator and you found a hag. And your first thing you want to do, if she hasn't noticed you already, is identify where the web is. So where was she coming from when you saw her? And you can usually bet that somewhere behind her, about 10, 20, 30 meters behind her, in either a line or some kind of zigzag, is going to be her web. So you're going to want to avoid that area. That's number one. If she starts chasing you, though, from the opening of the game, or pretty much at all during the game, unless she has Play With Your Food, which is a perk that will give her more run speed after she chases the obsession, unless she has that perk and she's running at normal speed, again, the hag is slower. So you'll be able to counter it by just chasing. If there's a really long hallway, if there's a really long loop, if there's a safe loop. If there's an unsafe loop, I would avoid it. Next, we want to talk about, let's say the hag downs you. Now, she downs you, she gets you on the hook. What are you going to do? Well, she's probably going to trap the hook, and what you're going to want your teammates to do is crouch to the hook, and then you, on the hook, you're going to be holding the crouch button as well, because if you don't, the hag is going to get to teleport as soon as you come off that hook. Now, some people use this to their advantage. They will ignore this altogether, and what they'll do is once they come off of the hook, they will dead hard or, sprint burst off into the distance. Now, these are potential counterplays, but if you want to save your exhaustion perk, you can crouch away when you get off the hook. You do not have to force your way off the hook with dead hard or sprint burst in some sort of way like that. So the trap will not trip, and this is something we're going to talk about a little bit more in a second. So the next thing you're going to want to do is pay attention to her zoning methods. So if the hag is in a chase with you around a short loop, what you want to do is pay attention close to, is she trying to zone you to the left or to the right? And if she is trying to zone you that direction, what are you going to do to get out of it? And you want to find a way out. You either want to use one of your exhaustion perks, dead hard, balance landing, what have you, or take a free hit, or what you can also do is just run to another loop if it's close by. So just be aware of what your options are, look around and see where you can go that's safe away from the hag, so that way you're not falling into her web because that's where she wants you to go. Another important thing, though, we want to talk about a little bit more in detail is learning to identify the skill level of the hag you're playing against. I consider myself pretty good. I'm certainly not the best of the best. I don't know. Maybe I am. I have no idea. But there's no leaderboard, so I wouldn't know anyway. So learn to identify the hag. You want to see something like, I see this a lot, which is like tripping the edge of traps. So you'll have some survivors who are pretty confident and think, let's see if she's good at getting ITH hits. Remember, instant teleport hits. Let's see if she's good at her reflexes. We're going to test her reflexes. I'm going to crouch into the trap and then run out of the trap. What this does is it gives you the head start out so that when she does her ITH or attempts to do her ITH, she will miss it. So you want to see, does she wait when teleporting to hit you, or does she try to hit you immediately, and will she teleport over and over again? This kind of thing. Like, can you keep her busy by having her replace the trap and teleport, and then you can go back in and do it again. So again, as I'm trying to illustrate this, but essentially you have, here's the radius of the trap, and then you crawl or crouch inside of the trap, turn around on the very edge of it, and then run out. So that's what you want to do. You want to run out of the trap. And this will give you a head start against the hag and will prevent most ITH hits. Another thing you want to look at is the hag's trap placements. Is she trapping in awkward places or in corners or maybe directly inside pallets, which would not be ideal. Those are generally considered poor places to put traps. It could mean that the hag that you're up against is not particularly strong. Another thing you want to pay attention to is how much is she chasing? A hag should almost never be chasing, or at least not chasing very much. And if you see her chasing a lot, you'll know that the hag you're going up against is probably not very skilled. So we talked about this a little bit early in the video, but what I wanted to also mention is that when the hag is doing actions like breaking a pallet or carrying a serrated hook. You want to start remembering where her traps were and tripping the ones that you know where they are, so that way she can't use them and has to reset them. This is a big strategy and a huge time waster for the hag, and really, really pisses me the hell off. Another thing I want to talk about is this last thing, which is a tip that I put out a few weeks ago and people loved it, so I'm going to just leave this for you. Do not run away from safe pallets. Make sure the hag kicks the pallet first. You can force the kick as the survivor. I know it doesn't seem like it because you're worried about jumping over and tripping the trap. But if you jump over the pallet and do not run, you just don't move. You don't have to crouch, you just don't move. Then the trap will not trip. So you can vault over a pallet or run away. Now the optimal play would be to stay there and not run away, because you want to use the pallet and waste as much time with that single pallet as much as possible. So you can actually force her to run around to come get you. When she comes around to come get you, you vault over, you don't run, and then she can't do anything. She either has to break it or she has to come back around and force you to jump over to the other side, at which point she'll try to do an ITH or something and you'll already be on the other side of the pallet. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you'd like to have me talk about next time. We can do another video like this. We can talk more about this in the future, about other hag abilities. We can talk about other killers if you want. But I enjoyed making this. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.